Thank you very much. The first poem is called By the Round Pond. You watch yourself, you watch the watcher too, a ghostly figure on the garden wall, and one of you is her, and one is you, if either one of you exists at all. How strange to be the one behind a face, to have a name and know that it is yours, to be in this particular green place, to see a snail advance, to see it pause. You sit quite still and wonder when you'll go. It could be now, or now, or now. You stay. Who's making up the plot? You'll never know. Minute after minute swims away. That poem actually began from a painting, although you don't really need to know that. But the second poem I'm going to read also began from a painting, and this one was commissioned by the Tate Gallery in London. You could choose anything you liked in the gallery to write about. It was for a book they were publishing. Now, the difficult thing was choosing from all those paintings and sculptures in the Tate Gallery. There's an exercise people sometimes do on creative writing courses where you put a whole lot of postcard-sized reproductions of paintings in envelopes, and then you shuffle the envelopes and give them out to the students, and whatever picture is in your envelope, that's what you have to write about, and they usually give you 10 minutes, right? That always works because it focuses the mind. But if you've got the whole art gallery to choose from, you just wander around getting a headache saying, I can't think of anything to write about. So in the end, I settled on a painting called The Uncertainty of the Poet. It's by Giorgio de Chirico, and I chose it just because I like the title. The two main things in this picture are a statue of a female torso and a very large bunch of bananas. And when I looked at it, the first thought that went through my mind was, I'm a poet and I'm very fond of bananas. So that is the first verse of this poem. And in the rest of it, I've just used those same words, but in a different order each time. The Uncertainty of the Poet. I am a poet. I am very fond of bananas. I am bananas. I am very fond of a poet. I am a poet of bananas. I am very fond. A fond poet of I am, very bananas. Fond of am I bananas, am I a very poet. Bananas of a poet, am I fond, am I very. Poet bananas I am fond of a very. I am of very fond bananas. Am I a poet? That one gets used in schools quite a lot. I get sheafs of poems saying, you know, I am a squirrel, I am very fond of nuts, and so on. I am nuts, I am... Right, now one about my own school days. This is a more or less true story about someone I was at school with. I changed the name because, for the sake of her family, I thought this might make them sad. So I changed the name, and the poem is called Titch Miller. Titch Miller wore glasses with elastoplast pink frames and had 1 foot 3 sizes larger than the other. When they picked teams for outdoor games, she and I were always the last 2 left standing by the wire mesh fence. We avoided one another's eyes, stooping perhaps to retie a shoelace, or affecting interest in the flight of some fortunate bird, and pretended not to hear the urgent conference. Have tuppy. No, have titch. Usually they chose me, the lesser dud, and she lolloped, unselected, to the back of the other team. At 11, we went to different schools. In time, I learned to get my own back, sneering at hockey players who couldn't spell. Titch died when she was 12. I just remembered halfway through that I haven't switched my mobile phone off. So I'll just switch the sound off. Right. Sorry about that. Can you hear at the back okay? Next one is about my grandmother. I wrote this not long after she died. I was thinking about the different names she'd been called in her life and how really the names tell her story. So this poem is called Names. She was Eliza for a few weeks when she was a baby. Eliza Lily. Soon it changed to Lil. Later she was Miss Stewart in the baker's shop. And then my love, my darling, mother. Widowed at 30, she went back to work as Mrs. Hand. Her daughter grew up, married and gave birth. Now she was Nana. Everybody calls me Nana, she would say to visitors, and so they did, friends, tradesmen, the doctor. In the geriatric ward, they used the patients' Christian names. Lil, we said, or Nana, but it wasn't in her file, and for those last bewildered weeks, she was Eliza once again. Now, this one I wrote not long after the events of 9/11. And it's called Spared, and it has, as an epigraph, that's a quotation at the top of the poem, 2 lines from the work of Emily Dickinson, that love is all there is all we know of love. It wasn't you, it wasn't me, up there, 2,000 feet above a New York street. We're safe and free a little while to live and love, imagining what might have been, the phone call from the blazing tower, a last farewell on the machine while someone sleeps another hour, or worse perhaps, to say goodbye and listen to each other's pain, send helpless love across the sky, knowing we'll never meet again, or jump together hand in hand to certain death, spared all of this for now. How well I understand that love is all there is. So that's really a love poem, I suppose, as well as being a poem about the public event, and this one's a love poem. It's called Flowers. Some men never think of it. You did. You'd come along and say you'd nearly brought me flowers, but something had gone wrong. The shop was closed, or you had doubts, the sort that minds like ours dream up incessantly. You thought I might not want your flowers. It made me smile and hug you then. Now I can only smile. But look, the flowers you nearly brought have lasted all this while. Now, 2 Valentine's poems. Do you have Valentine's Day here? Yeah. You have Valentine's Day, right, okay. Well, these are 2 Valentine poems, one that I wrote more than 20 years ago, and then I'm going to read another one that I wrote much more recently. This is the old one, Valentine. My heart has made its mind up, and I'm afraid it's you. Whatever you've got lined up, my heart has made its mind up. And if you can't be signed up this year, next year will do. My heart has made its mind up, and I'm afraid it's you. Well, actually, my heart changed its mind not long after. Then a couple of years ago, I was asked by a newspaper to write a Valentine poem, and I thought, I really don't know if I can manage another one. Thing is, I've now been with the same man for 17 years. And the fact is, I'm sorry to tell this to lovely young people, that when you've been with the same person for a long time, Valentine's Day can become a bit of a burden, you know? And so I thought, oh, well, anyway, I managed to write this, which is called Another Valentine. Today we are obliged to be romantic and think of yet another Valentine. We know the rules and we are both pedantic. Today's the day we have to be romantic. Our love is old and sure, not new and frantic. You know I'm yours and I know you are mine. And saying that has made me feel romantic, my dearest love, my darling Valentine. Two very short love poems. These are both about poets. The first one's called Favourite. When they ask me, who's your favourite poet, I'd better not mention you, though you certainly are my favourite poet, and I like your poems too. And this one, I don't know how many of you will have heard of the English poet A.E. Housman, but anyway, this is about him. It's called Another Unfortunate Choice. I think I am in love with A.E. Housman, which puts me in a worse than usual fix. No woman ever stood a chance with Housman, and he's been dead since 1936. And here's one about love gone wrong. Actually, two about love gone wrong. First one is called Loss. The day he moved out was terrible. That evening, she went through hell. His absence wasn't a problem, but the corkscrew had gone as well. And here's another one called Two Cures for Love. So if anyone here is in need of a cure for love, maybe this will work. Two cures for love. One, don't see him, don't phone or write a letter. Two, the easy way, get to know him better. A friend of mine who's a psychotherapist says he likes that very much. And I said, actually, it doesn't work for everybody. And he said, if it doesn't work for somebody, that person needs help, is what he said. Right, two poems that go together under the title Differences of Opinion. And the first one is called He Tells Her. He tells her that the earth is flat. He knows the facts, and that is that. In altercations fierce and long, she tries her best to prove him wrong. But he has learned to argue well. He calls her arguments unsound, and often asks her not to yell. She cannot win. He stands his ground. The planet goes on being round. And the second one is called Your Mother Knows. And in the first line, it says, your mother knows the earth's a plane. That means a plane in the sense of a flat surface, not an aeroplane. Now, the other thing to say about this poem is it's in a form called a pantoum, in which the second and fourth line of each verse become the first and third line of the next verse throughout the poem until you get to the end, and then you use up the first two lines from the first verse. I think it's a Malay form in origin. And the reason I'm telling you this is I think it's quite difficult just listening to poems without having them in front of you. And I think for me, if I know what form the poem is in, it actually helps me to listen to it. Your mother knows the earth's a plain, and challenged sheds a martyr's tear. God give her strength to bear this pain, a child who says the world's a sphere. Challenged, she sheds a martyr's tear. It's bad to make your mother cry by telling her the world's a sphere. It's very bad to tell a lie. It's bad to make your mother cry. It's bad to think your mother odd. It's very bad to tell a lie. All this has been ordained by God. It's bad to think your mother odd. The world is round. That's also true. All this has been ordained by God. It's hard to see what you can do. The world is round. That must be true. She's praying, hoping you will change. It's hard to see what you can do. Already people find you strange. She's praying, hoping you will change. You're difficult. You don't fit in. Already people find you strange. You know your anger is a sin. You're difficult. You don't fit in. God give her strength to bear this pain. You know your anger is a sin. Your mother knows the earth's a plain. Now, you will have noticed that quite a lot of my poems rhyme. It's not that I believe poetry has to rhyme. It's just that mine often come out that way. And sometimes I think I should try harder to get away from rhyme. And in fact, in my most recent book, there's quite a lot that doesn't rhyme. But this is a little poem I wrote about trying to write a poem that doesn't rhyme. And it's called An Attempt at Unrhymed Verse. People tell you all the time, poems do not have to rhyme. It's often better if they don't, and I'm determined this one won't. Oh dear. Never mind, I'll start again. Busy, busy with my pencil. I can do it if I try. Easy peasy pudding and gherkins. Writing verse is so much fun. Cheering as the summer weather. Makes you feel alert and bright, especially when you get it more or less the way you want it. Now, a form that doesn't rhyme, of course, is the haiku. And you probably all know haiku is a Japanese form. It can only have 17 syllables. But it can also have a title. And the title can be as long as you like, which is often very helpful. So this haiku is called Looking Out of the Back Bedroom Window Without My Glasses. What's that amazing new lemon yellow flower? Oh yes, a football. Now, I'm going to read, I was commissioned a couple of years ago to write some poems for a string quartet, a very good string quartet called the Endelian String Quartet. They probably played in Hong Kong, they've played most places. And they were celebrating their 30th anniversary of being together. And they asked if I was interested in writing some poems on the theme, the audience. And they said if I didn't like that theme, we'd think of something else. But I liked it very much. So I wrote some poems, and they're all about different people you might find in the audience at a concert of classical music. And then they commissioned a composer called Roxana Panufnik to write some music to go with these poems. And so when I perform it with the quartet, I'm the narrator, and some of the poems are in between bits of music. And some of them actually have to be read with the music. So I have to count and make sure I come in at the right place, which was really scary the first time I did it, because if you're just doing a poetry reading on your own like now, I can't really mess this up for anyone except myself. But if you've got a first-rate string quartet, you know, who never get anything wrong, and you're appearing with them at a concert, you really have to get it right. And so far it's been okay, and I'm not quite as scared now. On the other hand, you get the chance to dress up like a singer in a long evening dress, which is something you can't often do for poetry readings. So, now, I think I'll read this one called The Cougher. Now, this poem makes people cough, and do not worry. Do not worry if it makes you cough. It's my fault. Right. There's a tickle in your throat, and you've hardly heard a note, and you're wishing you were in some other place. In this silent listening crowd, you're the one who'll cough out loud, and you know you're facing imminent disgrace. Yes, right now you're in a pickle. The unmanageable tickle is a torment, and it's threatening your poise. Can you hold out any longer as the urge to cough grows stronger? Any moment you'll emit a mighty noise. If this bloody piece were shorter, if you had a glass of water, it would help, but there is nothing you can do. Oh, if only you could be safe at home with a CD, in an armchair, free to cough the whole way through. Do you hear a rallentando? Does this mean the end's at hand? Oh, what a mercy. Yes, they're really signing off. They perform the closing bars, and you thank your lucky stars, and it's over. You have made it. You may cough. Actually, what they say is that the musicians is that it's really not a problem if somebody coughs in a concert. The problem is that everyone else in the audience goes like that, you know. And probably the same with mobile phones. Now, two of the other characters in this, I'm not going to read all of them, there isn't time, but I will read the one about the couple on their first date. There's two poems called First Date, and one of them is her, and the other one is him. And so the first one, this is her. I said I liked classical music. It wasn't exactly a lie. I hoped he would get the impression that my brow was acceptably high. I said I liked classical music. I mentioned Vivaldi and Bach, and he asked me along to this concert. Here we are, sitting in the half-dark. I was thrilled to be asked to the concert. I couldn't decide what to wear. I hope I look tastefully sexy. I've done what I can with my hair. Yes, I'm thrilled to be here at this concert. I couldn't care less what they play, but I'm trying my hardest to listen, so I'll have something clever to say. When I glance at his face, it's a picture of rapt concentration. I see he is totally into this music and quite undistracted by me. And this is him. She said she liked classical music. I implied I was keen on it too. Though I don't often go to a concert, it wasn't entirely untrue. I looked for a suitable concert, and here we are on our first date. The traffic was dreadful this evening, and I arrived 10 minutes late. So we haven't had much time for talking, and I'm a bit nervous. I see she is totally lost in the music and quite undistracted by me. In that dress, she is very attractive. The neckline can't fail to intrigue. I mustn't appear too besotted. Perhaps she is out of my league. Where are we? I glance at the programme, but I've put my glasses away. I'd better start paying attention, or else I'll have nothing to say. Well, most of the poems in the audience are quite jolly, like that one, but they asked me to write a sad one, to give the composer a chance to write some music in different moods. So this is the sad one. It's a sonnet, Shakespearean sonnet. That means it uses the Shakespearean sonnet form with the couplet at the end. And it's called The Widow. I like this piece. I think you'd like it too. We didn't very often disagree, back in the days when I sat here with you and knew that you were coming home with me. This is the future. It arrived so fast. When we were young, it seemed so far away. Our years together vanished like a day at nightfall, sealed forever in the past. I can't give up on music, just discard the interest we shared because you died. And so I come to concerts, but it's hard. Tonight I'm doing well. I haven't cried. My head aches. There's a tightness in my throat. And you will never hear another note. This is where I have to stick in some extra ones because the list I made of about 22 poems only lasts 25 minutes. Don't worry, I'll go. Right. Anyway, this is a little poem. This is a little poem in a form called a triolet. And it's a good one to try if you're interested in trying traditional forms. Triolet is a good one to try because it only has 8 lines and it has 2 refrain lines. So once you've got your 2 refrain lines, there's not a lot more to do. And I often got students on courses to try this for that reason, but it gets me going, and then I write far too many of them. I mean, those Valentine poems I read you, those were also triolets. And here's another one. It's called Seeing You. Seeing you will make me sad. I want to do it anyway. We can't relive the times we had. Seeing you will make me sad. Perhaps it's wrong, perhaps it's mad, but we will both be dead one day. Seeing you will make me sad. I have to do it anyway. And this is another sonnet. This is about a love affair I had in a foreign country a long time ago. It was actually thanks to the British Council that sent me to Macedonia. And the poem is called Macedonia, 1987. A little crowd had gathered in the square. We read our poems, and they were polite. Then there was dinner in the open air outside the castle, a warm summer night. The local bigwigs lit up their cigars and asked us for a song, and straight away you stood. I see you underneath the stars. I hear your voice. I hear it to this day. I too can sing, but I am English, so although I wanted to, I didn't dare. And still, though that was 20 years ago, a male voice singing German takes me there. Bach and Schubert won't let me forget that evening, 5 days after we first met. Now, I was asking, I'm going to read you a poem about Christmas, and I gather you do celebrate Christmas here, but it isn't quite the big thing that it is in England, because I think your main celebration is Chinese New Year, right? And Chinese New Year is when you sort of have to be with your family and everything. And Christmas, I think, is slightly different here, but, I mean, Christmas in the UK is the big celebration. In America, I think, you know, Thanksgiving is perhaps more important for families, but in England, the thing is Christmas, and it's supposed to be a time of great happiness, right? And so it's anybody who has something sad in their life, this is a really horrible time. And this is what this poem is about. It's called A Christmas Song. Why is the baby crying on this his special day, when we have brought him lovely gifts and laid them on the hay? He's crying for the people who greet this day with dread, because somebody dear to them is far away or dead. For all the men and women whose love affairs went wrong, who try their best at merriment when Christmas comes along. For separated parents whose turn it is to grieve while children hang their stockings up elsewhere on Christmas Eve. For everyone whose burden, carried through the year, is heavier at Christmas time, the season of good cheer. That's why the baby's crying, there in the cattle stall. He's crying for those people. He's crying for them all. Right, well, that was the last one I planned to read, so I think I'll see if there's any questions, and if there aren't enough questions, I'll read a couple more at the end. All right? So, if anyone has a question, perhaps you'd put your hand up.
Are there any questions from the floor?
Oh, great.
Thank you, Miss Cope.
Hello.
Nice to meet you. So you are very down to earth for your poems, as I can understand. Huh? When I learn English, I find, it's very funny. Some vocabulary has a lot of has meaning, like family. Huh? It's spelled father and mother, I love you. See, is it funny? You see how the family composed this vocabulary. Is it true? And then another word, news. It composed of N-E-W-S. So that is north, east, west. and south.
Yes.
No, you see how this English vocabulary composed like this? I just wonder, since you are, learning, you are telling us poetry.
Yes.
Is this kind of poet
Yes.
have this kind of thinking
I
of
don't
composing
think I quite understand.
English?
Can anyone help me? I don't think I quite understand your question. You're asking about English vocabulary.
Yeah,
yes.
vocabulary.
Yes, and how it's composed.
So it's just come to me. There's two words.
Yes.
One is family.
Yes.
It spells like father and mother, I love you.
Right.
All right? Father and mother, I love you.
Yes.
So that compose this vocabulary.
To me, the word family doesn't necessarily mean something happy.
Not happy?
Not necessarily.
But it so happens is father and mother, I love you. See?
Aha. Well, some people don't get on so well with their father and their mother, right?
But how come it composed, like, and then make a word like family, see?
Yeah.
It originates from father and mother, I love you, see?
I see.
See?
Ah.
So another vocabulary, another word, news.
Yeah.
So it's
News.
from everywhere.
Oh yes, news comes from yes. That's
North,
what we
east,
call an
west, and
anagram
north, yes.
because news is made of those letters north, south, east, and west. I see that.
Right,
yes.
right.
I think that's just a coincidence.
Or coincidence,
Yeah,
I see.
I think so.
Because
Thank you.
it's always, in my mind, so
Thank
happen
you.
that I
Yeah.
can have a chance of.
Yeah, I think it's a coincidence that news, and I
today.
think I don't know if I'd ever thought of that. Actually, it's very interesting. People who do crossword puzzles would certainly know that. I think that the words. My partner, who does the Times crossword every day, would have known that news is an anagram of north, south, east, and west.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, hello.
Hello.
It's a pleasure listening to your seminar. I would like to ask, do you think rhyming in poems actually creates a sense of beauty in the poem itself?
It can do. It can do. It can provide all sorts of functions. I think rhyme is in itself enjoyable. So one of the things that can help to make a poem enjoyable and memorable is rhyme. And one thing that poems are supposed to be memorable, and rhyme certainly helps you to remember them. But it's not always beautiful. Sometimes there are in the world some very bad, sometimes people write very bad rhyming poems and they are not beautiful. So it depends how you do it. And I would say a rhyming poem can be beautiful, but a poem that doesn't rhyme can also be beautiful. Rhyme, it's kind of, when I first began to publish my poems, it wasn't fashionable to use rhyme at all. And so some people they think it's very old-fashioned, They think it's old-fashioned to write the way I write. But, I read a book. My sort of favourite artist in the history of the world is Johann Sebastian Bach, the composer. And I read a book once, and I hadn't realised this, that in Bach's time, everyone gave him a hard time for being too traditional and just using the old forms and not moving on. So I thought, okay, that's fine. If they said it about Johann Sebastian Bach, they can say it about me and I won't worry.
Okay, would there be an... I'm sorry.
There's a young lady down here. Hello.
First think about poetry, then we first about, especially Chinese, where we always think things about the emotion of sadness, talking about, I cannot be promoted, I lost money, so it's always think about something which is unhappy.
Yeah.
So, and as far as I read, I think most of the English poem, they are still having expressed the kind of emotion of sadness, of pain, and even most of the awarded poem that I've seen from my classmates talk about pain, talk about sorrow. So, do you agree with that? The majority of the poem is talk about the feeling of sadness, and do you think that it is possible to have Do you think it's possible to have some poems with happy endings can be more influenced?
It's a very, very interesting question, yeah. Yes, a lot of poems are unhappy. Probably more poems are unhappy than happy, but there is such a thing as a happy poem. And as it happens, I edited, and because I wanted to prove this, that there is such a thing as a happy poem, I edited a book called 101 Happy Poems, called Heaven on Earth, 101 Happy Poems, right? And it wasn't at all difficult to find 101 poems that were very good poems that were happy. And believe it or not, a couple of the poems in that book are Chinese. There are some, you were saying in Chinese it's mostly sad. Yeah, but I have come across, well, I can only read them in translation, of course. But there's a Chinese poet called, now I won't be able to say this right, you'll have to help me, Po Chu-yi. In English, it's P.O., that's his first. He's one of the great poets of the Tang dynasty, right? Along with Wang Wei, Li Po, Li Bai, Du Fu, yeah? And the fourth one is this guy, Po... Right. Could you say it louder so they know who I'm talking about? Yeah. Okay, this guy. There's the poem by him in my book is called On His Baldness. And this guy, he wrote a poem about how he really likes being bald, right? And I thought this was a very nice, happy poem and very cheering for any bald men who read it. So there's one example of a happy poem in Chinese. So, yes, often poems, including some of mine, quite often it is the poet is writing to help herself come to terms with something very sad. For example, the poem I read about my grandmother, this was because I was feeling great grief because my grandmother had died, and writing a poem helped me. And same as all my poems about love affairs going wrong when I was younger, it was also to help myself I wrote those poems. So I think that misery produces more good poems. But happiness does produce some good poems, and that's why I edited this book to prove it. Even in Chinese, there's some happy poems.
Any more questions? The lady at the back, please. Or maybe the lady at the front.
Miss Cope, I've read your poem Serious Concerns, and there's a part where you said, I write to make people anxious and miserable and to worsen their indigestion. But I find most of your poems quite amusing. So is that 2 stages of your life, or is it just came out as amusing?
That was a joke, yes. why I wrote that was, you see at the top of that poem, I haven't got the book with me, but a critic had come to a reading I did, and he said she writes to amuse. He said she writes to amuse, which is both her strength and her limitation. And he seemed to think it was a bad thing to write to amuse. So that's why I wrote the poem saying, write to amuse, what an appalling suggestion. I write to make people anxious and miserable and to worsen their indigestion, which is, of course, not true. But, I mean, you know, what's the opposite of writing to amuse? You know, writing to make people miserable? Writing to make people feel bad. So anyway, so really I was protesting against, and if you look at the poem, you'll see at the top, you know, I've quoted what this guy said that kind of annoyed me, which is why I wrote that poem.
The lady in white, please.
Hello.
Hello. What's your favorite thing about poetry?
Gosh.
Very standard question.
Yeah. What's my favorite thing about poetry? Dr. Johnson said that the only point of any writing is to help people better to enjoy life or better to endure it. And I would say that, you know, sometimes I read a poem that just, you know, if I come across a new poem I haven't read before that is really, really good, and sometimes I think, oh, I wish I'd written that. But, you know, something I really enjoy, that's wonderful. And sometimes I will come across a poem that moves me to tears or a poem that makes me laugh. But also sometimes in really bad times, reading poems, and I think this is true for a lot of people, can really help me through the bad times. So those are 2 important things about poetry. Could you answer that question? No, you don't have to try. It's just I thought if you did have an answer.
I could try.
Yeah.
Well, I really like really pretty imagery.
Yeah.
Well, pretty things and pretty sounds and all the pretty stuff.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah, I
Well,
know,
that-
not very deep, but
No,
yeah.
but I mean that is perfectly legitimate. It's perfectly legitimate. Yes, absolutely. I mean that's another important thing. I mean being, or you know, just being beautiful is another reason. It's part of the enjoyment of poetry.
Yeah.
That some poems are very beautiful. Yes, and create beautiful pictures in your mind.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Would there be another question? The lady at the back, please.
Ms. Cope, I'd like to ask about word diction in poetry. Like, I realize that your poems, it's usually really, the word choice is rather simple, so you don't use too much hard words.
Yeah.
And I've heard that people say simplicity is the best in poems, so I'm just wondering...
Simplicity is what?
Is the best for
Uh-huh.
poems, because I'm just wondering whether we should, like, use rather simple and straightforward phrases instead of dumping all the hard words in the poems. Is that better to express your feelings?
I think you should do what comes naturally to you. And there are some poets, say like Seamus Heaney, who's a wonderful poet, but their poems are much more embroidered and much more full of imagery and full of kind of more unusual words. And this is how he is, right? And it so happens that the way... poets don't really plan, you know, how to write. You just have to be yourself in your poems. And this is me being myself. And I think one thing that has influenced my writing is that I spent many years of my life teaching very small children. And when you're teaching very small children, you have to use simple language. And, you know, you have to make yourself understood. So it became sort of second nature to me to speak and write in a way that was easy to understand. But that doesn't mean it's the only way to write poetry. And, you know, often, I mean, some poets that do use a bigger vocabulary, there's nothing wrong with that. But don't put in unusual or difficult words just for the sake of it. You know, I mean, I think a good question to ask yourself is, would I actually say this if I was speaking to someone? And by and large, it's quite a good rule to stick to the language you would use when you were speaking to somebody. And there are some people, you know, who do use more flowery language than I do. But I think that the way to go is when you're writing a poem is to ask yourself, am I being truthful? And I think if you aim to be completely accurate and find the right words to tell the truth about whatever it is you're writing about, you'll get it right. I hope that's helpful.
Another question, maybe the lady at the back here.
Thank you, Miss Pope. Do you have any views on using swear words and slang in poetry?
Yeah.
I mean, you cannot find a better words.
I have no problem with that at all.
Yeah.
I mean, it causes all sorts of problems with the BBC. You know, you can't broadcast that poem before 9 o'clock in the evening. Was kind of, you know. I mean, people in the UK get very upset by certain words, and as far as I'm concerned, they're just words and they don't upset me. And I mean, you know, in that poem, that word works, right? I mean, I don't think there's anything to be said for using rude words or slang just for the sake of it, but actually sometimes the slang word or the rude word is the right word. And I think, I mean, perhaps the teachers of these schoolgirls don't want me to say this, but I mean, I don't have any problem. I have no problem with it at all. And if that is the word that the poet feels they want to use, then fine. That's my view. I mean, you can argue with me if you like.
No, I'm not arguing. Do you have any observations that, I mean, if you
but
look
you
at
see
some...
how, actually, just to interrupt you for a moment, when you quoted that line by Larkin, people gasped, you know? Which is interesting, yeah. Anyway, sorry, do go on, I interrupted.
Sorry. Do you have any observations that, say for example, you just mentioned about BBC, etc. Those are sort of middle markets purporting to represent the petite bourgeois and the sort of lower down, like the Sun, the Daily Mail. When they use F word, they use F star star star.
Yeah.
But when you go to sort of when you look at those papers which the top people really read, like the Financial Times,
Yeah.
they actually use the whole word
Do they? I
F-U-C-K.
don't read the Financial Times. Do they really? Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
I would distinguish. I would not bracket the BBC, by the way, with the Mail.
So
and
you
the
see that the
Sun.
real, those top people read papers. They don't give a damn about
but,
it.
I mean, the BBC, I would not bracket BBC with the Mail and the Sun. I mean, BBC Radio 4 is not the same thing as the Mail or the Sun. But that is interesting, yes. And I mean, I think it is true that people higher up the social scale are more educated people are less worried by those words. Yeah. But the BBC does have to be careful because it has a very wide and varied audience, and because, and I mean, a lot of middle class people as well would be upset by the use of those words. I mean, I just find it quite ludicrous that people make so much fuss if somebody, but they do have to, they do have to be very careful, and. I have to say, I don't even notice. I mean, I've made mistakes. Like, my mother was very shocked by any of those words. And one time I went to see a play, and because I don't even notice swear words, really, I recommended this play to my mother and stepfather, and they went to see it. And afterwards they said, we didn't like the language, So, and I said, oh, gosh, of course I didn't notice. And I can't remember what it was. It wasn't Shakespeare.
Oh, sure.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I know that you have a very robust stance against the publication of your poetry on the internet.
Yes.
And I wholeheartedly support the idea of copyright and the poet earning the hard crust. I just wondered, I've come recently to live in Hong Kong, and everybody here has some kind of electronic communication device.
Yes.
Given the proliferation of these devices since perhaps you originally made that stance, I wondered if you'd changed your mind at all?
Well, I mean, even more worried. I mean, even more worried than I was before. No, this is absolutely serious. I mean, I'm going to ask, before I go, if this is being recorded, you do not have my permission to put it on the internet, by the way. I don't know. I'm even more concerned than I was before. And, I mean, a lot of people will say the battle is lost, but I don't actually believe that. And in June this year, I was invited to the World Copyright Conference in Brussels. And, those were all people who, like me, are engaged in fighting for creators' rights. Because it's not just writers, it's composers, photographers, musicians. I mean, if all our work is free on the internet, how do we earn a living? It's as simple as that. I mean, and it's the idea, and I mean, one thing that is important in this is educating people. Educating people like you to understand that, artists deserve to be paid for their work. And, I mean, for me, selling books is a crucial part of my income. And I think poets are particularly at risk because, as writers go, because no one's going to download and print out a whole novel, really. Although, I mean, although with the whole thing with e-books, this may change the picture a bit. But, I mean, for a long time, and it's the same with photocopying. I mean, photocopying was also a problem because it's very easy to photocopy or download one poem. And often, I mean, I've often in the past bought a book of poems because there's one poem in it I especially wanted a copy of. And now nobody needs to do that. They just get it off the internet. And it just drives me crazy. I really, and because people just don't understand what they're doing. And I don't think there's much hope. With musicians are getting themselves organised because there's a lot of money in the music business, they are getting organised. There's not a lot of money in the poetry business. I mean, I sell more books than most poets. That's why I'm concerned. Because if you don't sell any books, there's no need to worry, really. If your income all comes from grants and prizes and you don't sell any books, you don't need to worry. But no, I really feel very strongly about this. And I mean, it's sort of become a second career, really. That's why I got invited to Brussels. It was not to read my poems. It was a second career, being a person who makes a big fuss about copyright. A few weeks ago, I was at a meeting in London with a member of Parliament where this was just about this. It was a number of people who are concerned. You see, you've got me going now. You've got me going. No, I mean, it is theft. It is theft. Downloading somebody's work from the internet without paying for it is theft. And this is the message that everyone should understand. Thank you very much for asking the question.
Oh, hi. When you were saying that writing poems
Oh,
Where are
here.
you? Oh, there you are. Right.
Yeah. When you said that writing poems was helping yourself, I was wondering, like, when you're struggling with something and you have to write a poem about it, that means you have to, like, really focus on it, right? And in a way, you can't really let it go. So is it always that you have to get through that miserable process first? And also, are there some things that are just too much or too precious for you to put into words?
Right, two good questions there. Now, the thing about unhappiness is I don't think you can just let it go without working through it, whether you're a poet or not, right? I think if you can focus on it, I mean, I think what I find helpful is working out exactly what it is that I'm upset about. That can be helpful. And also sort of arranging it in a shape and a pattern, in a contained form. It doesn't solve the problem. It doesn't stop you grieving for your dead relative or your lost boyfriend or whatever, but it helps. It helps. And I don't think, I mean, I think whether you write a poem or not with great unhappiness, you do, I mean, certainly with you know, bereavement, you certainly have to work through it. You know, you just have to go through the grief. And I think that I find that, and I know I'm not the only one who finds that writing poems can help, and also reading poems can help with that. And what was the second part of your question? I've forgotten. That was the senior moment. Oh, if you've forgotten as well, I won't feel so bad.
It was whether or not you had anything that was too much to put into words. Yeah.
I don't think so, no. But there might be some things I don't want to publish. That's two different. There's another thing you have to understand about poetry is writing a poem and showing it to the rest of the world are two different things. So I can write a poem and promise myself I'm not going to show anybody. Then I might change my mind, you know. But I mean, I have written poems that hardly anybody has seen, and certainly haven't been published for one reason or another. So no, I don't think there's anything that would be too precious or important to write about. In fact, I think the more precious or important something is, the more I would want to be able to write about it. But I might not want to make it public straight away or at all. So, you know, I might just leave it for someone to read about when I'm dead.
Okay, the last question from the floor. Maybe this girl over here.
Hi, I have a dilemma within myself whether a poem should be planned before writing it or just letting my flow of thoughts. And I'd like to ask you, how do you begin writing a poem? Do you plan or just follow your thoughts? Thank you.
There's a good question. No, I certainly don't plan in advance. I usually start with some words that sound as if they could be a line of a poem, right? And I write them down and see where it goes. But then, it's not my first draft. I mean, my first, it might not even be a poem. It might just be some thoughts, just some thoughts and ideas. Notes, it might just be notes. Or I might even occasionally work out in prose just what it is I want to say in the poem. But it will go through lots of drafts. So I don't plan it in advance. I kind of plan it as I'm working on it. You know, it sort of develops as I'm working on it. So I don't know to begin with what shape it's going to have or how it's going to end. And, you know, then I gradually take shape as I'm working on it. But I don't start off with a plan. Sometimes I think if I've got a commissioned poem, I sometimes think, well, I'll try a sonnet and see where I get to. Yeah, but I might change my mind about that, because I think there's a lot of trial and error in writing a poem. You might start off in one form and then decide it's going to be in a different form, or you might decide to drop the line you first thought of, and you don't really know. You don't really know where you're going to get to with a poem until you start writing it. And so it's quite an exciting journey just to see where you get. But I tell you another hint I would give you is that I always write in notebooks, because if you write on bits of paper, different drafts, you get muddled. And, what's great about writing poems, unlike painting pictures, if you paint a picture, if you've got a picture and then you change it, you can't really go back to what you had before. But with poems, you can. You write one draft, you write a second draft, you can look at them and decide which one you like better, and you can go back to the earlier one. So I always write in notebooks, so the pages are all together, and I can go back and look at my earlier drafts and decide which version works best. Thank you for your question.
Thank you, Ms. Cope. So if there are no more questions, this is the end of the reading. Would you please kindly leave your feedback by completing the questionnaire on your seat? Also, for those who are interested in Ms. Cope's work, please line up at the center row to get your book signed. Lastly, if you haven't got Ms. Cope's book, copies of them are available at the counter outside the room. Thank you. Once again, on behalf of the HKTDC, I would like to thank Ms. Cope and all of you for joining us today. Thank you.
Thank you very much.